Elevated fraud-related chargebacks from a merchant location may be a reflection of gaps or vulnerabilities in the merchant's authentication and fraud prevention capabilities. Therefore, merchants must remain vigilant and act swiftly to identify and mitigate any vulnerabilities to fraud that may jeopardize the cardholder's trust in using their Mastercard-branded card and place a financial burden on the payments ecosystem. To help monitor and address merchants with excessive chargebacks, Mastercard established the Acquirer Chargeback Monitoring Program within the Data Integrity Online application on Mastercard Connect. The program has two components: Excessive Fraud Merchant, or EFM, and Excessive Chargeback Merchant, known as ECM. The EFM program monitors fraud-related chargebacks from e-commerce transactions at the merchant identification number or merchant ID level. More specifically, EFM searches for chargebacks reported by issuers to Mastercard's fraud and loss database using reason code 4837, no cardholder authorization, which means that the cardholder has indicated to the issuer that they did not authorize the charge. Chargebacks reported in this manner are used to establish the merchant's monthly fraud chargeback count. A merchant is identified as an EFM for a given month if the merchant meets or exceeds all four of the listed criteria with regard to the merchant's number of e-commerce transactions, amount of fraud-related chargebacks, number of fraud-related chargeback basis points, and the percentage of the merchant's clearing volume processed using EMV 3D Secure, also known simply as 3DS. The 3DS utilization threshold is dependent on whether the merchant is located in a non-regulated versus a regulated country. Please refer to the Mastercard standards for more country-specific information. To calculate fraud chargeback basis points, Mastercard tallies the number of fraud-related chargebacks in a calendar month. That amount is divided by the number of Mastercard e-commerce transactions processed for the merchant in the preceding month, and then that number is multiplied by 10,000. For example, 200 first presentment fraud chargebacks in October, divided by 25,000 e-commerce transactions in September, multiplied by 10,000, would equal 80 fraud chargeback basis points for a particular merchant. When identified as an EFM, the acquirer for that merchant will receive an email from Mastercard notifying them about the merchant's identification. To receive these emails, the acquirer must be registered for the Data Integrity Online application. The acquirer must then review the identification details that are within this application as provided in the Merchant ID Compliance Report. Non-performance assessments start to apply when a merchant is identified as an EFM for 2 months. These 2 months can be either consecutive or non-consecutive. The merchant will continue to be identified as an EFM until the merchant no longer meets or exceeds the program thresholds for 3 consecutive months. If a merchant is identified as both an excessive fraud merchant and an excessive chargeback merchant for the same violation month, only the EFM assessments would apply for that month. Mastercard will assess acquirers for unresolved merchant performance issues, even if the acquirer has not registered for Data Integrity Online. Because assessments will increase over time for merchants that continue to be identified as an EFM, acquirers must work with their identified merchants to develop a strategy that will restore the merchant's performance to Mastercard standards. The acquirer can request an extension if necessary to allow more time for the merchant to investigate and resolve their fraud-related chargeback issues through actions including enhancing fraud prevention capabilities and processes. After reviewing an extension request, Mastercard may ask the acquirer to submit an action plan explaining the cause of the fraud-related chargebacks, the actions being taken, and controls being implemented to bring the merchant's fraud-related chargebacks below the program thresholds. These controls may include the consideration of whether the adoption of 3DS authentication would help mitigate fraud. Merchants that have a sophisticated fraud prevention system in place, using tools such as 3DS, machine learning, real-time fraud scoring, velocity monitoring, device ID, and IP geolocation in combination with manual review processes, are less likely to experience fraud losses and therefore far less likely to be identified by the EFM program. To help safeguard the integrity of the Mastercard network, our goal is for all acquirers to monitor their merchants to ensure the best procedures and controls are in place to mitigate fraud. Addressing the root causes of fraud-related chargebacks can help to decrease fraud and improve the cardholder's purchasing experience, benefiting cardholders, issuers, merchants, acquirers, and the overall payments ecosystem.